What happens when a restaurant owner goes undercover in his own establishment and overhears something from the kitchen that makes him question everything he's built? This is the story of James Caldwell, a man who thought he knew his business inside and out, until a single whispered conversation revealed a truth so devastating it would either destroy his empire or force him to become the leader he should have been all along. That it's a busy Saturday morning in April 2022 at Harvest Table, a popular farm-to-table restaurant in Portland, Oregon. James Caldwell, 54, sits alone in a corner booth wearing a baseball cap and reading glasses he doesn't actually need, looking like any other customer enjoying weekend brunch. He owns Harvest Table along with 4 other restaurants across the Pacific Northwest, a culinary empire he built over 23 years from a single food cart to a multi-million-dollar operation. Today marks his 3rd undercover visit in as many months, part of what he calls quality assurance, but what really amounts to checking if his staff maintains standards when they don't know the boss is watching. He orders the farmer's omelet, coffee, and wheat toast, exchanges pleasantries with his server, a young woman named Maya who seems competent and friendly, and settles in to observe. The restaurant hums with the controlled chaos of a Saturday rush. Every table is full, the open kitchen visible behind a half-wall where line cooks move with practiced efficiency. James mentally catalogs everything: the cleanliness of the dining room, the speed of service, the presentation of food at neighboring tables. By his professional assessment, everything looks good. Maya brings his omelet within 12 minutes, perfectly plated with a garnish of microgreens and a side of roasted potatoes that still steam slightly. He tastes it and has to admit it's excellent. Fresh eggs, quality cheese, vegetables that actually taste like they came from a farm. He's about to congratulate himself on running a tight operation when he hears voices from the kitchen, not loud enough for most diners to notice over the ambient noise. But James has spent decades training his ear to catch kitchen conversations. "Did you take your insulin?" a male voice asks with quiet urgency. There's a pause before a female voice responds, shaky and weak. "I can't afford to refill it. I've been rationing what's left. I'll be fine for the rest of the shift." James's fork freezes halfway to his mouth. He recognizes the second voice. It's Carmen Rodriguez, his head chef, the culinary genius who'd been with him for 11 years and was largely responsible for Harvest Table's reputation for innovative, seasonal cuisine. The male voice belongs to Tyler, the sous chef. James leans slightly toward the kitchen, straining to hear over the clatter of plates and the conversations of nearby diners. Tyler's voice rises with barely controlled frustration. "Carmen, you're literally shaking. You can't work a line in this condition. How long have you been rationing?" Carmen's response is defensive. 3 weeks. "Look, the prescription costs $400 even with my insurance, and I had to pay my daughter's orthodontist bill. I'm managing it, okay? Just don't make this a thing." There's the sound of something metallic hitting the floor, then Carmen's strained voice. "I'm fine. I just got dizzy for a second." Tyler again, more insistent. "You're not fine. You need to go home, or better yet, to a doctor. This is dangerous." And then Carmen says something that makes James's blood run cold. "I can't afford to go home. We don't get sick days. If I leave, I don't get paid, and I'm already behind on rent." James sits motionless, the excellent omelet turning to ash in his mouth. Carmen Rodriguez, the woman who'd helped him develop the seasonal menu that won them a James Beard nomination, the chef who regularly worked 60-hour weeks and never complained, the person he'd publicly called the heart of Harvest Table. In a Portland Monthly profile just 6 months ago, she's rationing insulin because she can't afford her medication. And she's doing it because his company doesn't offer sick days to employees, a policy James had implemented years ago, citing industry standards and cost management. He'd never thought about what that policy actually meant for real people with real medical conditions trying to survive on restaurant wages. James forces himself to finish his meal mechanically while his mind races. He pulls out his phone and opens the HR portal for his restaurant group, something he hasn't personally reviewed in years because he has a human resources director who handles these details. What he finds makes him feel physically ill. His full-time employees, and Carmen definitely qualifies as full-time with her hours, receive health insurance. But it's a high-deductible plan with a $4,000 deductible and significant copays for prescriptions. There are no paid sick days, no paid time off for hourly employees, and no provisions for medical emergencies. The policy looks exactly like what it is, the minimum legal requirement, designed to keep costs low and profits high, with no consideration for the human beings whose labor generates those profits. He navigates to payroll records, something else he hasn't examined closely in years. Carmen earns $22 an hour as head chef, which sounds reasonable until James does the math. Even working 60 hours a week with overtime, her annual income is roughly $68,000 before taxes. In Portland, where the median rent for a two-bedroom apartment is $2,000 a month, and she's raising a teenage daughter as a single mother, that salary suddenly looks inadequate. Meanwhile, James personally cleared $3 million last year from his restaurant holdings. The disparity has always existed, but he justified it with standard capitalist logic. He took the risks, built the business, deserved the rewards. But sitting here listening to his head chef admit she's rationing life-saving medication, those justifications feel obscene. Maya returns to refill his coffee, and James makes himself ask, "How long have you worked here?" She smiles, clearly pleased he's making conversation. "About 8 months. It's a good gig, better than most restaurants." James pushes further. "Do you get benefits?" Her smile falters slightly. "I get health insurance after my first year, but I'm only scheduled 30 hours a week, so I don't qualify yet." That's pretty standard, though. She's been deliberately scheduled just under the full-time threshold that would trigger benefit eligibility, a practice James knows is common across his restaurants and the industry generally. Another cost-saving measure he'd approved without thinking about Maya specifically, or the dozens of other Mayas working in his establishments. James pays his bill, leaves a generous tip that now feels like a pathetic gesture, and walks out to his car where he sits gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. He's built his reputation on ethical sourcing, on paying farmers fair prices for quality ingredients, on sustainability and community engagement. He's given countless interviews about his commitment to doing business responsibly. The irony is devastating. He pays more attention to the welfare of the chickens that produce his eggs than to the people who cook and serve them. His restaurants have won awards for supporting local agriculture, while the humans making that food happen can't afford insulin or basic health care. The next 72 hours are a blur of spreadsheets, meetings, and difficult conversations. James brings his CFO, his HR director, and his restaurant managers together and announces immediate policy changes that they warn will significantly impact profitability. All employees, regardless of hours worked, will receive health insurance with low deductibles and comprehensive prescription coverage, effective immediately. All employees will receive paid sick leave, 5 days annually for part-time staff, 10 days for full-time. Hourly wages across all positions will increase by 20%, with head chefs like Carmen receiving a 30% raise plus annual bonuses tied to restaurant performance. The CFO projects these changes will cost roughly $400,000 annually across all 5 restaurants, reducing James's personal take by a significant margin. But James isn't finished. He establishes an emergency assistance fund, initially capitalized with $50,000 of his own money, to help employees facing unexpected medical bills, housing crises, or other financial emergencies. He mandates scheduling changes to ensure employees know their hours 2 weeks in advance, ending the exploitative practice of keeping people just under full-time status. And perhaps most radically, he implements a profit-sharing program where 10% of quarterly profits will be distributed among all employees based on hours worked. These aren't industry-standard practices. They're expensive, they'll be criticized by other restaurant owners as unsustainable, and they'll absolutely cut into James's personal wealth. But after hearing Carmen whisper that she couldn't afford insulin, he doesn't care about industry standards anymore. That on Monday morning, James calls an all-staff meeting at Harvest Table before the lunch service. Carmen is there, looking exhausted but stable, and James can't meet her eyes as he begins speaking. He doesn't mention the undercover visit or what he overheard. That would humiliate Carmen publicly, which is the last thing she deserves. Instead, he simply announces the policy changes and the reasoning behind them. "I've realized that we've been operating under a flawed model. We've prioritized profits over people, and that's not the kind of business I want to run. These changes are effective immediately, and they're non-negotiable." The room is silent, staff members exchanging confused glances, clearly waiting for the other shoe to drop. When James adds, This also means everyone here is getting an immediate raise and full benefits. The silence breaks into shocked murmurs. After the meeting, Carmen approaches him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Caldwell, I don't know what happened to change your mind, but thank you. You have no idea what this means. James does know, actually, more than she realizes, but he just nods and says, You've given 11 years to this restaurant, Carmen. We should have been taking better care of you from day one. That's on me, and I'm sorry it took this long. She hugs him, this professional boundary being crossed in a moment of genuine emotion, and James holds on perhaps a moment too long. This woman who'd been suffering silently while he'd been congratulating himself on his ethical business practices. The changes ripple through James's restaurant group with mixed results. Two of his managers quit, arguing that the new policies are financially reckless and will make them non-competitive. His CFO warns repeatedly that they're operating on dangerously thin margins now. Some restaurant industry peers criticize him publicly, suggesting he's grandstanding and creating unrealistic expectations that will hurt other businesses. But the effects on staff are immediate and visible. Turnover, which had been hovering around 70% annually, normal for the restaurant industry, drops to 20% within 6 months. Applications for open positions increase dramatically, with experienced hospitality workers specifically seeking out harvest table locations because word has spread about the benefits and wages. Most significantly, the quality of food and service noticeably improves. Employees who aren't worried about affording medication or making rent or juggling multiple jobs to survive bring more energy and creativity to their work. Carmen develops a new seasonal menu that's the best of her career, dishes that earn the restaurant its first Michelin star consideration. Customer satisfaction scores rise. And somehow, despite the CFO's dire predictions, revenue increases because excellent service and innovative food attract more diners willing to pay premium prices. The restaurants don't become more profitable for James personally. His annual take drops from $3 million to $2 million, but they become more successful by every other meaningful measure. James begins speaking publicly about his transformation, giving a notably honest TEDx talk in 2023 titled, What I Heard from My Kitchen. He shares the story of going undercover and overhearing Carmen's conversation about rationing insulin, though he doesn't name her specifically. He talks about the cognitive dissonance of building a business on ethical sourcing while exploiting the humans doing the work. And he challenges other restaurant owners directly. We'll pay $22 for a pound of heritage pork because we believe in fair compensation for farmers. Why won't we pay living wages to the people who cook that pork? We'll source organic vegetables to ensure quality. Why won't we invest in healthcare so our staff can maintain their own health? The mental gymnastics required to be ethical about ingredients, but not about labor, are exhausting, and they need to stop. The talk goes viral in hospitality industry circles, generating both enthusiastic support and vicious criticism. A prominent restaurateur in New York writes an op-ed calling James's approach naive and financially unsustainable virtue signaling that will inevitably fail. James responds not with argument, but with data, employee retention rates, customer satisfaction metrics, revenue growth, and most importantly, testimony from staff members about how the policy changes transformed their lives. Maya, the server who'd told him about waiting for benefits, writes a particularly powerful statement. For the first time in my restaurant career, I'm not choosing between paying bills and seeing a doctor. That shouldn't be revolutionary, but in this industry, it is. 2 years after that whispered conversation in the kitchen, James sits down for an interview with a food industry publication. He's asked if he regrets the changes given the financial sacrifice involved. His answer is immediate. My only regret is that I didn't do this 20 years ago, that dozens of employees struggled unnecessarily, because I was more focused on profit margins than human dignity. I was a good businessman by conventional standards, growing revenue, opening new locations, winning awards. But I was a terrible leader because I didn't truly see the people making my success possible. That conversation between Carmen and Tyler, overhearing her say she couldn't afford insulin while working in my kitchen, that should never have been possible. And I'm grateful it happened where I could hear it, even though I'm ashamed I needed to hear it at all. Carmen Rodriguez, now a partner in Harvest Table with a small equity stake James offered her, reflects on the changes in a separate interview. I was literally putting my life at risk because taking care of my health felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. The fact that I worked for someone who heard that and decided to change everything, not just for me, but for everyone, that's rare. I know there are critics who say these policies aren't sustainable, but we're proof they work. And honestly, if treating your employees like human beings with dignity and healthcare needs makes your business unsustainable, maybe that business model deserves to fail. So what's the lesson from James Caldwell's Undercover Breakfast? It's not just about one restaurant owner who happened to overhear something that shamed him into action, though that's part of the story. It's about how easy it is to build systems that look successful on paper while causing immense suffering for the people within them. It's about the dangerous gap between our values and our practices, between talking about ethics and actually living them. And it's about the fact that sometimes you need to stop congratulating yourself on your accomplishments long enough to actually listen, really listen, to what's happening in your kitchen, your office, your organization, wherever people's lives are being affected by decisions you've made from a comfortable distance. If this story made you think about the gap between what organizations say they value and how they treat people, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever worked somewhere that didn't take care of its employees? Or have you been part of an organization that got it right? Subscribe for more stories about people who heard uncomfortable truths and chose to change rather than defend the status quo. Because sometimes the most important conversations happen in whispers, and sometimes the real measure of leadership is what you do when you finally stop and listen.